Hello.
Attila Juhasz.
Yes.
That sounds a little clearer. I guess it takes a second call to learn your name and to get a proper connection.
Fantastic.
Dude, how are you? I'm doing great. I'm in the same pair of pajamas I was 6 weeks ago. I'm looking out of the same window, so everything's status quo. How about you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for asking. Crazy times, but we all have to do what we have to do, and I'm kind of used to it, so I'm not really that much out of my element. I work from home regularly. I'm pretty much of a shut-in as it is.
Oh.
This is kind of natural for me.
So now, are you considered an essential worker? I know Chris was for a while. I don't know if she still is, but are you considered an essential worker?
I believe so. I can't say for sure. We'll see how my applications come back.
Oh, well, there you go.
But the fact that I am in media,
okay.
I own a network of OTT channels, and I work for Sun Studios as well as a consultant for their Terror TV team as well. So yeah, entertainment is essential for people.
Yes, indeed. Yes, you don't have to convince me.
Yeah. However, I would never dream of putting myself in the same classification as our healthcare workers and our police and fire.
They are soldiers. They're
Absolutely.
Not essential workers. Well, they are, but they're soldiers.
They're critical.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, let's talk about you. Yes, I know you as that really nice guy who does all that wonderful stuff over at Terror TV. But then I looked you up and I was like, holy shit! You have a huge career. You have a multi-decade career. You've created video games. You run studios. You're like one of the power players. Tell my listeners about yourself.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, where to begin? All right. Well, let's recap it real quick. In the 90s, I published my own rock and roll magazine called New York Consulate that I circulated with Tower Records in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And that's where I started my rock and roll roots, doing all these interviews with rock stars. And that's when I developed a working relationship with Rob Halford, the lead singer of Judas Priest. So this is going back to '92. And then in the mid-'90s, I was introduced to this new thing called the Internet. And
that's a fad.
And I decided, you know what, I gotta look into this. And I self-taught myself HTML using Notepad. And I felt that this was a real essential part of technology that's going to take off. So I actually was one of the first browser testers. I was on the team that did the first Mozilla browser testing on the beta team. So I was fortunate enough to be with the select group of people who used the world's first web browser. And then when I got a taste of that, then I said, you know what, I got to do something with this. And then I built horrormovies.com, which was considered the world's first commercial genre website. And that just took off. And by '98, it was a massive site, and I sold it to a publicly traded company, Unipix Entertainment Inc. And they hired me as the director of internet marketing, and we were in the Madison Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. That was a wonderful gig.
You're blowing my mind because I remember that so well. Oh my gosh!
Dude, really? Oh, wow. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then while I was doing horrormovies.com, I then produced the first internet seance ever, and I did it with a radio station called Iyada.com, and in the Scream Queen, Debbie Rashan, and the two of us did the world's first internet seance. And it was crazy because it was kind of my Orson Welles War of the Worlds kind of moment. Of course I was doing it as kind of a prank, but some people took it seriously, which was a little unfortunate. But
oh, that's great. So it was a joke, but everybody thought, okay, the ghosts are coming online.
Yeah, because I sold it. I sold it in the way, and I did a whole national radio tour on this leading up to the event, and it was a lot of fun. And I was saying that there's an old family history of mine that I was related to Vlad the Impaler. Totally false. But I figured, let's throw it out there, and that just got picked up by the media, and we did it. So here's the kicker. Okay, so we hosted the seance. I did the fake calling of Vlad. Even fake that I was possessed by him because I speak Hungarian. So I started speaking Hungarian. And people were like, "Oh my God, he's speaking some hateful language." And so the event is over, and I say goodnight to everyone. And I'm leaving the studio in Manhattan, and I'm walking to the parking garage. Now this is Halloween weekend, and just as I'm turning the corner, some maniac jumps out and screams and to scare me, and he's dressed as Dracula.
Oh, boy.
I said, what did I just do? And then I got to tell you, from that point on, for like an entire year, I've had nothing but bad luck. And if you speak to Debbie Rashawn, she'll say the same thing. It was like a whole year of bad luck. She got hit by a car, and it's just one thing after another. So the old adage is, don't fool around with things you don't know about.
Oh, you summoned somebody that night.
So that was kind of my horrormovies.com history, and the Unipix. But then I kept being involved in the internet, and the rock and roll world. I guess it's jumped to 2005. I left New York with my family to come to Phoenix, Arizona, where I helped run Metal God Entertainment, which is just a big media company for Rob Halford, the lead singer of Judas Priest.
Did you move because of the job?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he flew me out and showed me around. And I actually turned the job down.
Huh.
And but then he called me back and gave me a better offer that I just couldn't refuse. So that brought us out here.
Very cool.
To Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah, and that lasted until about 2012, and until that went into the crapper. And what I mean by that is the two owners, Rob Halford and his business partner, two of them ended up in a kind of a vicious lawsuit.
Oh.
And so all the assets were frozen. The company had to be dismantled. And here I am, 50 years old, and now no job, needed to start a new career. And I said, you know what? Time for the OTT world. And that's where I've been since. Very
cool. Very cool. And so now you're one of the masters over at Sun Studios.
And in the digital technical area, yes.
Terrific. Yeah. Terrific. Now you've had quite the varied career. What was like a highlight? What was that aha moment that you had?
Probably working with George Romero. I'm a huge fan of Dawn of the Dead, my absolute favorite horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I produced a video game that I coded myself, 2,000 hours, 2 years of effort. So I hired George Romero to be my lead villain, and just to hear him read the script that I wrote was just a great treat.
I saw that the trailer that you had for it, just to see that big smile of his go, yeah, this is terrific. That was quite wonderful.
Yeah, it was a great moment for me. I actually have the entire session of his audio recording on video. So maybe one day I'll revisit that and let the world see what it was like putting together this big game with George Romero.
Very cool. So very cool.
Behind the scenes footage, yeah.
What's the connection between heavy metal, rock, and horror movies? I'm really old, so enlighten me. What's that connection? You get the Rob Zombie factor as like a zenith of that. Where's that connection come from? The hard rock and the monsters.
I find they both touch on the subject of the darker side of life. And it's pure escapism into that dark realm while still being safe. Now, but that's only part of heavy metal. I personally do not like to pigeonhole heavy metal as just dark and gloomy and horror, because there is some really good positive stuff out there as well.
Oh, for sure.
But in general, I mean, you look at the band Black Sabbath. I mean, they took the title from the Karloff movie. So
right.
The Karloff movie.
Which is funny because Rob Zombie took his name and his group from the Bela Lugosi movie of White Zombie.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's great to see like those legends, the Karloffs, and Bela Lugosi still being endeared today, and to see artists carry on the tradition and so forth, and give these kinds of nods to them. And it was great. I mean, another highlight for me was doing some of being on the set of your Terror Talk episodes. I mean, meeting Reggie Bannister, for example, was fantastic. But again, Sarah Karloff and Lynn Lugosi Sparks, two icons as well. So again, those very recent but very cool moments for me.
I had the best time because I've been a fanboy for far too many decades. And as I'm sitting there chatting with them and we're having dinner the night before, I'm trying to look very mature, but in my head I'm going, oh my God, this is a Karloff and a Lugosi. Wait a minute. And the same with Reggie Bannister, the same with all of these guys. It was really exciting. So I'm glad I wasn't the only one going, yay, in their head during it.
Right. But at the same time, you have to be very cool and professional.
Oh, of course. Oh, my gosh. Speaking of being cool and professional, how's it going out there in terms of now you guys are now in lockdown. You guys, I'm here in ground zero, so we were locked down first. But how have things changed over there in Arizona in terms of lockdown, in terms of everything?
Well, now it's become a little tougher because we're in the early heat wave. I mean, it's 104 degrees today.
Oh man!
As well as tomorrow. So I mean, we are inside, but now, we're forced to put the AC on already. It's a little early in the season, but when you do venture out and you go to pick up your groceries or your prescriptions or whatever your essential chores are, people overall have been very respectful and doing the 6 feet apart and the social distancing. So I'm happy to see that. It took a while. I have to say it did take a while. Yeah. I mean, I started doing this well over a month ago, and I've been prepared since. I got to say, I've been preparing since January.
I thought so.
So I'm very fortunate here at home. But it took a while. People weren't really seeing the signs, of just the magnitude of this thing. But now, fortunately, they are, and hopefully we'll get through this.
What signs did you see? You said you've been prepared since January. I've been hearing people say, this is when it started, this is when it started, this is when it started. You seem to know more than most. Why were you prepared all the way in January?
Well, I listened to a lot of different sources, non-traditional sources. Mm-hmm. So I look for niche podcasts and interviews such as yourself, but going with top health officials. I mean, going back to January and February, when you first heard of this going in China, there were people talking, there were interviews happening, and there were people that I actually heard that said there's, no matter what, this is going to hit the U.S. and it's going to spread. And so I took that warning seriously, just for the fact that I was fortunate enough to catch that segment when I heard these little tidbits of warnings.
I'm really happy to hear that. Do you think we need to take that moment now? Now you've worked in all these wild industries. Do you think we need to take that moment to look at non-traditional sources? Now we hear what we hear on the news. We hear the New York Times. We hear whatever the big whatever the big sources are, and people tend to just listen to that. Do you think we need to take a step back sometimes and say, wait a minute, let me get a third, fifth, and 12th opinion?
I think people should have been doing that all along.
Yeah, good.
And I think that should be a way of moving forward. I mean, anyone in media, no matter what side of the fence you're on, they have an agenda, no matter what side of the fence you're on.
Sure.
And if they didn't have an agenda, why else would they be speaking? Because they want to be heard. Therefore, thus the agenda.
Brilliant.
Whether or not it's for positive or negative reasons, I'm not one to say.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that, I look at both sides of the story. I take both sides. And I see what both have to say. I look for the commonalities, and then I take those commonalities, and then I look for actual sources that both were referencing, and find out, the truth, more or less, and then more or less come to my own conclusion, of what I think.
Excellent.
Is the truth, and that's sad in itself that we have to play modern day Sherlock Holmes and detective work to just find the truth. That's all. Yeah.
I think we have to do that for everything. You go to a doctor and he says, do this, take this pill and whatever. You need to take that moment and say, okay, what's another course of action? Or is this the best? Or what's the side effects? Or something. We're always told that. So yeah, of course, if we hear one news program say something, let's hear 10 of them say the same thing
right.
before we decide what we're going to do.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so now let's play horror movie for a minute. We're in a horror movie out there, and that's that.
Yep.
I asked two questions. Number one, horror movies themselves. I've always thought they're the prophecy. That if you look at anything Romero did, and you replace the zombie with Corona with COVID-19, you almost have the same movie.
Yeah.
If we look at Contagion, which was done in 2011, it's almost word for word of what we're living. We can look at everything from the days of Karloff and Lugosi all the way through, and we see parables that come true. Do you think, as long as we're looking for a second opinion, you think sometimes it's good to look to those of great imagination in the horror genre for prophecy?
Absolutely. Because, people with these great imaginations, that imagination stems from somewhere. So whether or not it's a universal source of knowledge and or just their years and years of experiences of learning and listening to previous people with great imaginations. I still go back and I pick up my H.G. Wells books and my Jules Verne books every now and then. I go back to the classics, and I go back to my Greek tragedies. I guess the point is that imagination it stems, some of it, and a lot of it actually, stems from actual experiences, and then you use the imagination to make it exciting and worthwhile of telling the tale. Now, so yes, I absolutely agree with you that you can find answers. I guess that's what it is. You can find certain answers to questions that may be looming in your mind, in genre movies and books as well.
You're absolutely right, and you said it brilliantly, because I've always thought, what's the difference between the Greek tragedy of the Cyclops or the Medusa, or the oracle that predicts, or the Griffin and the oracle that predicts what's going to happen to Oedipus? How much different is that than a really well-made genre movie? So. Yeah. We are looking at prophecy, whether even the author knows it or not. Sometimes I'll ask a player screenwriter, I'll say, are you a genius by accident or on purpose?
Right. Yep.
Okay, so here's the biggie, and here's the one I don't think I've gotten the same answer twice. So there's no such thing as a right answer for this. And you have been in the music industry, the computers industry, the media industry, television, radio, magazines, the whole works. So here's I look forward to your opinion. What happens when the doors open? What kind of world are we looking at once restrictions are relaxed a bit?
I think we are looking at a totally changed world. I think once it's relaxed, I think it's not going to be the same. I think the entertainment industry, especially, and sports, not just film, but sports, which lumps into the entertainment.
Sure.
I think this is a reality check, actually, for these big companies. Some of these athletes, some of these movie stars, and the production costs of films are out of hand. You can't sustain that kind of industry and then expect to gouge the public with your high prices. So, therefore, because of this pandemic, and people, I don't know if you saw that article on Variety yesterday, where they expect that only 17% of audiences expect to go back to a sporting event.
No, I didn't see that. There, you ruined my day.
If there's no vaccine, 17% of adults only will go to sporting events, while 40% of adults will go to concerts.
Wow.
Now, but here's the grimmer side of that story that they didn't even address. They're just looking at it from the factor of fear of the virus. They're not looking at the economic factors. Now, the person who's been going to be unemployed now, let's say for a couple of months, the last thing they're going to want to do is spend their last nickel on entertainment. They got to spend money to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. So with that in mind, the whole economics, like as I was saying, concerts, let's say, completely out of hand with the prices.
Yeah,
completely out of hand. And yes, of course, there's inflation and all that. But let's look at it this way. When I was a teenager in the 70s, I could go to Madison Square Garden and work only 3 hours of my minimum wage job while I was in high school. Only 3 hours, and I had a ticket at the Garden. Now, today, if a kid who's in high school is working a minimum wage job, he's got to work 15 hours to see the same freaking show today.
Sure.
Now, what happened? That's what I'm saying. The reality check has to come into play, and I'm sorry to say, some of these guys, you got to take them down a notch. You don't deserve that much pay for entertaining. Yes, I'm all for success, but I am not for gouging.
That's brilliant. That's exactly right. I'm hearing a lot of people talk about, tickets going to go up, tickets going to go down. You're absolutely right. Everyone has to learn to take a pay cut somewhere, and it needs to start as high as possible.
Absolutely. And it's got to start with these Live Nation. There, I'll call them out, okay?
There you go. That would be gorgeous. Do you think? Let's even get more horror movie. Do you think live theater and live entertainment will even come back in some form? I'm hearing a lot of people talk about, because there's Zoom plays that are happening. There's these concerts. I sat through the gala for the Met and Stephen Sondheim's birthday, which I think both encompassed about 47 hours of entertainment. And I didn't leave my living room to do it. Do you think people are going to say, I don't need to possibly get sick, I don't need to travel, I don't need to do that, I'm just going to enjoy it right here in my screen?
Yes, and I think that will be the new norm until there is a virus, and until they know that they are safe.
Yeah.
And then there will be a comeback. We will have, look after the Black Plague, there was a renaissance, right?
Of course.
The same thing's going to happen here. So, after this, we're going to have a renaissance and a new way. You're going to see new forms of entertainment. You're going to see just a whole new world.
Wow.
and we have to really look at things differently. I don't expect, personally, the live theater and the live concert attractions to really come back strong until 2022.
Yeah.
I think people are going to slowly go back, and they will, and some places will set the rules where you got to sit like 3 seats apart, maybe,
Oh, sure.
If you're not, unless of course, your little group of 2 to 6 people can sit together, but then the next group of 2 to 6 people have to be 6 feet apart and so forth. So, but even then, people are going to be very leery of that, and it's just going to be a long road back. But I think it will be a comeback, and I think this is going to give a great opportunity for all the out of the box independent artists that are out there, the ones that think out of the box. This is their opportunity right now. And they're doing it. They're doing their own little, their home concerts, just like all these big artists. I'm seeing a lot of my friends, a lot of my independent people. They're doing their own little live streams right from their living room with their little tip jar, their digital tip jar,
right? And
it's working. That's just one aspect of it. But I think this is an opportunity now for the B team to have an opportunity to play fair against the A team. Because the A team right now is being cut down, due to these circumstances. And so is everyone else. I mean, the B team, everyone's cut down. But, stay strong, believe in your craft, and keep digging and look for those out of the box ideas. I mean, that's been my whole way of thinking my whole life. I've always been an out of the box kind of guy.
And it's certainly paid off, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
It's interesting you say that, because when this first happened, Rosie O'Donnell did her Broadway fundraiser, and I'm sitting there watching these Broadway performers, and I smiled to myself, and I thought, the playing field is now leveled, because there's the Broadway performer in his living room, then there's the movie star in his living room, then there's the guy who just wants to get someone to hear his music in his living room. So yeah, you're right. The A team and the B team, they are one team right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it takes it takes a little genius, and maybe to save some money, and maybe we'll have a world again. Yeah.
And now is the time, because of the situation. People are coming up with creative little snippets of video, and this is an opportunity now. We're going to see some future stars rise from obscurity out of this. I know it.
Wow. And one of those stars is going to be you. You're going to be there, considering you know all this. Whatever world we get, you are already equipped to absolutely run it. Attila, it is always a pleasure to speak to you. I have such a great time with you out in Arizona. I'm like missing not going out there. I look forward when, even if it's 6 feet apart, I could get on some plane and get out there. I wish you the best. Stay healthy, the whole works. Thanks so much for this. And
thank you.
I look forward to chatting with you online for Terror TV.
Sounds great. Take care, Jay.
Thanks. Ciao.